Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Veilguard, and this is going to be a bit of a hyper-negative review. I'm going to use the newest IGN video, which came out a few days ago, as basically just the vehicle by which I'm going to be talking about the criticism of what we've seen, what we haven't seen, what has been hinted, and what has been outright shown. Alright, so let's get right into it, starting with some of what's already on screen, right? We see here the aesthetic that Veilguard is going for, which is very much an aesthetic of hyper fantastic, bright shining lights. This is, in my opinion, not the best. This creates very tiring visuals that will get very, 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 very tiring as soon as you start to play for a long period of time. Having more muted colors in the background with all of these bright shining lights makes it so all of these spells, all these effects become blinding and you don't fully appreciate the animations that are in the game, which, I will be honest, are the best in the series so far. And it's a bad thing because it takes away from it what is in the game rather than adding to it. So, as we proceed with this, let's go right into the combos here. We see here a combo occurring with either an Overwhelm, I think in this case it's Siphoned, and then somebody else came in and triggered it, and we see here it's just a bunch of damage, right? I think this is an outright downgrade to what we had in Origins, and it's unfortunate that after 3 games, as in Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, where they also did things this way, it was very clear that this was a downgrade to the complexity of the combat in Origins. And unfortunately, they leaned into it rather than pulling away. I think we would have been much better served if we had been given an actual combo system with certain spells comboing with other spells for new effects rather than just an additional bit of damage. I think that the additional bit of damage simplifies the combat to the point that it takes away from how interesting combat can be, and it takes away from the complexity that makes it more fun. Another thing I want to talk about that is on screen, we see here Necrosis. Now, Necrosis is a new element in Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Dragon Age Inquisition. We know about the 5 elements in the world of Dragon Age. We have ice, we have fire, we have nature, which includes both rock-based attacks and poison, we have lightning, and then we have spirit, which includes anything from psychic attacks to pure magical attacks, such as an arcane bolt. It seems as though, at least from what I'm seeing and what we've been shown, I'm not sure of this, I'm not like certain 100%, but it seems as though they have taken nature and spirit and melded it into one effect. I think this is a bad thing because we have grown used to these 5 elements before, like so far, and spirit was the element that you would use whilst you were fighting spirits. It was the thing that was strongest against them. And taking that element away is bad because it alienates the previous games and it gives a sensation of a lack of humility. It feels as though the devs are kind of saying, what came before, we're not interested in it at all, we want a new audience. We've seen a lot of other interviews, I'll put the excerpts on screen so you can see, and it really does feel as though the devs do not like what came before. They're almost embarrassed about where Dragon Age came from, and I think that that's a very, very bad attitude to go into what they seem to want to be the climax of the series. You can't make a good climax without paying respect to what came before. There's a build-up to a climax, and if you just give us the climax and you try to cut out the build-up that has been occurring for 3 games at this point, granted, Dragon Age has kind of been a little disjointed with how things have gone, with the setup of one game not following through into the second one. Like in Origins, we're shown that or we're told that the Warden Commander, if they survive, goes out and tries to cure the calling. But then in Dragon Age 2, we have a completely separate story. And then at the end of Dragon Age 2, we are set up with the Mage Rebellion. And then at the beginning of Inquisition, we're given a completely separate story that starts just as the Mage Rebellion is ending. And I feel like that's not great. And it very much feels as though Veilguard is doing the exact same thing with Solus being set up as the villain at the end of Trespasser, the person that we're going to be going after and trying to stop, and then Veilguard picks up just as we catch up to Solus and he accomplishes his plan and a new threat is established. I think that this is something that Dragon Age has done in all of its past games, and it's a bad thing. It makes the story feel disjointed because you have to read through books, comic books, and the like in order to catch up to the story and know what's happening. And it feels as though Veilguard is built not for the people who played the games before, especially if you played Origins, you're not the target audience. If your favorite game in Dragon Age is Origins, you are not the target audience for this game. They have more than shown this with going with the action-packed route, with going with all sorts of other means of going around things that distance itself from the complexity and the tactical aspects of Origins, rather than leaning into what made this franchise be as loved as it is. And so now we're left with something that almost exclusively wants the audience of Inquisition and new audiences. Now, do I think that this will acquire those new audiences? Yeah, it's shiny and it's bright, and so I think that it gives off a very Marvel-esque vibe, which I think a lot of people will like. So, on to the next topic. I want to talk about this guy here, who is almost certainly a Revenant, and I really do like the appearance of him. I don't know if this is going to be the look of Revenants throughout the entire game, but he looks very nice. I hope that we get more than just one iteration of this. We've had more than enough time in development for there to be more than one type of each enemy, and I would be very disappointed if we're left with the same type of enemy variety as Inquisition and Dragon Age 2, which was, in my opinion, pitiful. At least in Origins, granted, there were the limitations of the engine at the time, but in Origins, you had certain encounters, such as the Forge Master in the Deep Roads, once you got to the Dead Trenches, which was a completely unique encounter. It was a Darkspawn Genlock who had a bow, called, I think it was the Spear Thrower, and it had a very high armor piercing. And that was the fight. The fight was all around this one boss Darkspawn that had this special bow, and he only appears here. And this wasn't something unique to this specific Darkspawn. Throughout Origins, almost every single encounter was tailor-made, with the NPCs appearing in that moment with that exact setup, and they would never appear again. And I think that made the game feel much more special, and I hope that we get that here. I hope almost every encounter has something unique to it. If that's not the case, then this game will have less enemy variety than the first game in the franchise, which is now 15 years old. So I think that would be a very big downgrade. Smash, very nice character. This is from the character creator, just a little way of showing. Very nice. I like the tattoos. I like the hair. We've seen the hair physics. They're awesome. We've seen the makeup. It's awesome. I love it. Genuinely love it. Smash. Neve is awesome. I love her. We also have now confirmation that mages can now heal again, which is good. It was a thing that was changed in Inquisition. It shouldn't have been changed. Onto the Kunari. I hate the way the Kunari look. These are just people with horns. This isn't Kunari. We've seen Kunari in Origins, and that was a pre-realized Kunari in Sten, where he didn't have horns, he was really tall, and he had purple eyes. Like the irises of them were purple. And he felt inhuman just by the way that he acted around people. Now, in Dragon Age 2, we see more inhuman Kunari. And throughout the comics, that's the Kunari that we're given. Ashen skin, giants, very sharp features, almost bony. Their faces almost their skin and faces almost seemed like stone and very ashen. They had the horns, and there were very large, very elegant looking horns that were honestly very intimidating, and it made the Kunari appear as an inhuman threat. And then in Inquisition and now in Veilguard, they seem to want to humanize them as much as possible. They give them the same voices as everybody else. They make them look like everybody else, and I think that the Kunari suffer for it because it makes them look just like regular humans, and I don't think there's a single person who likes the Kunari that wants them to be just humans but taller and with horns. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think anybody likes this. This is bad. This is bad. Awful design. I hate it. Terrible. Pass. Big pass. Not smash. Would not. Now, this is something that I do like. We see here a Darkspawn ogre. Very clearly, that's an ogre. And it's a special ogre. And you see that he has a different weapon than other ogres that we've seen. Now, another thing that is on screen that I personally really dislike, attacks cause enemies to light up. This leans into what I talked about right at the start of the video, with the game being very, very, very Marvel-esque, right? MCU-esque, where instead of hitting an enemy and there being a gush of blood as you cut into them, you rip a chunk of flesh out and you feel as though you've hurt them, you hit them and they light up, and it reminds me that I'm playing a video game. And while I understand I'm not supposed to forget I'm playing a video game, because, you know, that would show a very, very clear lack of mental understanding of what my surroundings are, it's still not good for the video game to constantly remind you with just how you play. And it's not as though this is something that in Dragon Age is new, right? In Origins and Dragon Age 2, every time you hit something, there's a gush of blood. That's how you're reminded that you hit something, and that was good. Origins was better. In Dragon Age 2, they also did add that little light up effect when something is hit, and then in Inquisition, I believe they did the same thing. So when we're given this, I don't like it. I think it's bad, and I think we would have been better off having a more serious fantasy style where it feels as though we're actually brutalizing a giant enemy to kill it before it kills us, rather than, you know, hitting a giant enemy in a video game. This is a nice art style, absolutely. I still don't like the look of the new Darkspawn. I would prefer if they were more like the Darkspawn of Origins, but I understand that there is a story reason as to why this change was made, and so I will give them the chance to earn their place, so to speak. I like that this enemy looks unique, though. I think that after 10 years of development in Veilguard, BioWare has no excuse not to do this, and if they don't do it, they should be called out on it. We see here a warrior rook with a giant hammer, and in my opinion, the wrong armor. We see she's wearing very leathery armor with cloaks and the like. She's got a little bit of armor on her shoulder, but that looks more as though it's there to embellish rather than protect. She's not wearing gauntlets. She's not wearing heavy boots. She just has this giant hammer, and that's how we know that it's a warrior. Other than that, we wouldn't know that's a warrior. I think that heavy armor has been downgraded every game since Origins. We had the massive armors in Origins, which looked absolutely fabulous. They were awesome. They looked big, chunky, heavy. You looked at that, you know, okay, that's a warrior. That's somebody who is going to stand in the front line and get attacked and gonna laugh off all the damage that gets thrown at them. In Dragon Age 2, the armor was kind of made smaller but more concise. We got some different art styles of armor, and that was good. We also got actual fully stylized Grey Warden armor, which was very nice. I liked it a lot. But unfortunately, it was still not the massive armor of Dragon Age Origins, which in my opinion is the best version of heavy armor in the game. We're not going to talk about the armors from Inquisition because every single one of them was ass. Genuine ass. Buttocks. Booty. Terrible. Hated it. We see here the thing from the first bit of gameplay that we were shown, which shows the very first level, and we see here a rogue that is, as you see here, capable of using magic. Now, it appears as though everyone is now capable of using magic to some extent in their attacks. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think it's related to the Veil weakening, thanks to Solus's efforts. And is it good? We'll see, right? We'll see how it's handled. I think it's something that was used because they wanted to make the game more colorful, so it leans itself into that MCU-esque aesthetic that I talked about. Do I think it's a good thing? Not really. We'll see how it turns out in the actual game. I'm going to give it a chance before I, make my full final judgment. I will say, the environments look beautiful, genuinely amazing. I like them a lot, and it really shows that they did absolutely have 10 years to work on this game, and it shows. Pass, again, Kunari that just looks like a regular person. Hate it, don't want it, get out of my screen. We see here what appears to be rage demons. Unfortunately, this is another one of those things that was changed, and in my opinion, it was an unnecessary change that should not have happened and shouldn't have been made. I think that this is just bad. We're 4 games into the franchise. You should not be changing the designs of the most iconic creatures in the setting for the 4th iteration of the game, right? I understood the change to the Genlocks and the emissaries from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2. I understood that they wanted them to stand out more. I could understand that. Did I like it? I could understand it, right? But this is the 4th game, right? We had 3 games of just constant iteration of the style of the setting being solidified, and now it's being changed again. And I don't know, I don't believe that there's going to be a proper explanation for this, because the whole point of demons was that they only appeared when the veil is weakening. So if the veil is weakening everywhere, they would appear everywhere, but they would still have the same shape that they had before. That wouldn't change, and that shouldn't change, in my opinion. So we'll see how that turns out. We'll see if there's an explanation as to why they're different. I hope there is. If there's not, that's awful. They shouldn't, they absolutely need to explain why the demons suddenly look different, because they can no longer use the excuse of, oh, in Origins, we hadn't really fully realized the art style that we were going for in the setting, right? Because we've had Dragon Age 2 for them to solidify that, and we've had Inquisition to solidify it further. So we see here a mage using spells. I do like the appearance of the mage. It looks very nice. We see here an Antivan Crow Rook traversing a city, and we see here traversing a forest, and this warrior rook traversing the crossroads. The crossroads look very, very interesting to me. This is an actual elven construct that we see here that's fighting this mage rook, which, very nice. Now, I know that people have talked about this, and by people I mean Asmongold. He doesn't like the way this thing falls. This is a nitpick, obviously. Does it look a little weird, the way that it accelerates? The way it kind of just... whoop, I guess, a little weird. Does it bother me? Not really. We're going to move on from that. One thing that we should be getting talked about around here-ish is the Darkspawn. We see here, look, I want to talk about this attack. This attack with the hammer looks extremely goofy to me. She just jumps in the air, and a giant mallet, like a Looney Tunes-ass mallet, just forms in her hand, and she bonks the enemy on the head. I dislike that. I think it looks goofy. If I had to make a bet, I'm pretty sure this is meant to be Mighty Blow. And the way to do proper Mighty Blow is to pick up a heavy-ass weapon and swing it at the enemy, not to manifest a giant mallet, right? This just looks goofy. I don't like it. Again, it's clearly just an aesthetic thing. I don't have to like it, and I don't like it. I do like to see that this appears to be a horde fight, where you see here the health of the actual horde itself, rather than the health of a single enemy. And I think that this is interesting. I think it allows us to know when we're fighting against waves. It's nice enough, right? Sure. It's not terrible. Pass. He's an arrogant, egg-looking, teacher fetish wannabe. I don't like him. Goofy. Um, we already said smash on Neve. She's awesome. That's Varric over there. Give us a zoom in. Give us a zoom in on Varric. Come on. Give us a zoom in. Give us a zoom in on Daddy Varric. There we go. Zoom in on Daddy Varric. Big smash. I love this guy. He's awesome. Ever since Dragon Age 2, he's been one of my favorite characters in the game. And genuinely, I cannot think of a way that Dragon Age would be made worse by having him in it unless they completely butcher his character. One of my favorite characters. I love him. I love seeing him as an older man with a beard and all that stuff, since now he's also the Viscount of Kirkwall. He's got a lot of other responsibilities, so it's kind of weird that he's here, but still funny. And we see here something that I dislike this a lot. So we've seen this rook already in the gameplay, and she's carrying knives and a bow. We know that she's a rogue, right? So tell me why she grabs a stool and physically overpowers these two Venatori when she's a rogue, right? Like, come on, BioWare. We've had 10 years of this, right? You really want to tell me that you couldn't make 3 different cutscenes? One for mage, one for warrior, one for rogue? Come on. This is why it feels worse and worse to play a warrior in this type of games, because they take the things that should be for the warrior, being strong, being tough, wearing heavy armor, and they diminish it by making the armors not look like full suits of armor, and they give the feats of strength, physical strength, to the other classes, and it takes away from the class fantasy of being a warrior. And I don't like it. I think it's very lazy design, because you're not actually thinking about how somebody who is physically weaker than their enemies is going to work through a problem that would normally require physical strength, right? We see here a little bit of another snippet of combat. They talk here in the preview about how this leans away from the tactical RPG vibe of Origins, and in my opinion, that's not a good thing. I don't like that. I think that that's bad. I think that the tactical aspect of Origins is what has made it so that that game is essentially a game that will be played forever. I think that a lot of the people who play Inquisition will stop playing Inquisition the moment that Veilguard comes out. I don't think anybody who plays Origins will stop playing Origins the moment Veilguard comes out. So I think that a lot of the people who are playing Inquisition are just playing it because that's the latest game in the franchise, not because it's the best game in the franchise. So we'll see if I'm proven wrong on this, but I genuinely believe that not making the game, not adding that layer of complexity with the spell combos, as I've discussed before, with the extra tactical aspect of things, is a bad decision that will not make the game better. I do like that we can switch weapons back and forth here, though. As you see here, he's switching back and forth between attacking with 2 swords or daggers. We know that the rogues can use swords again. And using the bow. He's comboing the spells from his allies, and that's very nice. I like that. We see here a fight against an ogre. I believe this is a low-level rook. Yeah, she only has the 2 abilities. That's something else I want to talk about. Reducing the amount of abilities. For this, normally I would say that's a bad thing, right? Because as I've talked about, I prefer a more tactical approach to combat, where you're supposed to think about things. I think that it's a good decision to reduce the number of spells you have if you want it to be an action-focused combat. Because if you want it to be focused on combat and the action-packed aspect of things, where you're dodging, you're fighting, you're doing all this stuff, the abilities should be secondary. They should be these big hits of damage that you throw out, but the vast majority of your damage should be coming from auto attacks, dodging, parrying, doing all that stuff, right? Again, nitpicks to some extent, but still. We see here he's fighting the betrayal of Felasan again, which, in my opinion, I'm pretty sure that's a Revenant. And we see here he's fighting some Kunari. That is meant to be a Kunari. Now, this is what a Kunari should look like. This guy looks inhuman. The skin tone is definitely not human. Look at it being all ashy and stuff. Let me see if I can increase the. No, I can't. Can't seem to make this look any prettier. But I like this look for the Kunari. I think all the Kunari characters should look roughly like this skin. We don't see his face, so I have to assume that it's a human face on a Kunari body, but the physical aspect of the Kunari outside of the face looks inhuman enough for me to think, yep, that's a monster. That's a humanoid monster, or a monstrous humanoid by D&D terms. I like that about the Kunari. I think that that's how they should have gone with them. I dislike that they made them so human-looking when it comes to the actual characters. We see here them fighting some more Darkspawn. We've already talked about that. Let's skip forward a little bit. We see here some more of the things that are happening. Now, I want to talk about this little shot. I don't know if this is because this character just doesn't have a chin, or the chin is like super far back, but this facial expression bothers me and it looks weird. The jaw is too far back and that eye is off. I've seen a few of these animations that look just a little bit off, right? This is a nitpick. I'll say this. This is a nitpick. It's not a major thing, but I have seen a few of these animations that look a little off. We also saw another one in the high-level gameplay reveal, I think it was, where Davrin walked in a cutscene and he was very straight, and it was very strange to watch him just walking like that, and it bothered me, and I talked about it at the time. But it's just a little nitpick. We'll see if this is more generalized, because as soon as she starts talking, it looks fine. It's just when she was normal, right? And this face looks very normal, right? This looks like a regular face. I don't dislike it. It was just when the face was still, it looked weird. By the way, we see Harding here. Absolute smash. Love Harding. She's awesome. Let's skip forward a little bit more. We see here that she's talking with Solus, and Solus is being the little arrogant D-bag that he has always been. Because you didn't immediately submit to his authority on a topic, he says, all right, well, you deal with it immediately. Just like, you question him, oh, how dare you? He wants nothing to do with you anymore. And he says that the thing that he caused is now your problem to solve. Because, of course, he does, because that's Solus for you. So we see here they're sitting around, just having a little conversation, and Harding is mad at you for some reason. And then we see here another rook. This rook looks really, really nice. And we see... Come on. Show us Davrin. Show us Davrin. I want to see Davrin. Davrin looks awesome. I like Davrin. Nice, strong jaw, big, thick neck. I look at him and I go, yep, that guy's a warrior by profession. That guy beats the shit out of people as his profession. And we also have Hassan, who... I'll be honest, I understand the idea of making him cute so that you can sell more merch of him. Like later, there's obviously toys, there's going to be all sorts of thing, and that's what's going to get all of the Dragon Age girlies going ee about him. But honestly, I would prefer if we had like a big, mean-looking griffin that looked dangerous and imposing, rather than a small thing that, I don't know, it just... I would not take Hassan into battle, because he just looks too young, right? I would not feel comfortable bringing him into a fight. But he is cute, I will give him that. So let's skip a little further forward to see some more things. Now, we see here some demons, and these are Shades. This is the new appearance, if I'm not mistaken, of Shades, which are basically demons who aren't able to fully form in the real world. Do I like it more than what we had? Not really. I don't. I liked them kind of looking almost formless and shapeless, like dripping oil, and kind of raking at you with claws and trying to get at you and using spells to weaken you so that they could get their hands on you and rip you apart. That felt very demonic to me. This feels like they're ghosts. And I don't know, that feels less cool to me. We see Neve here looking awesome. And another segment of them fighting Darkspawn, which, you know, not the biggest fan of the new appearance of Darkspawn, but I will say I like the time to kill. I've mentioned this before, but notice this giant enemy. He's got this overshield. It's kind of like the way they do it in Mass Effect, where the shield kind of prevents them from being pushed around as much. It's an okay way to make sure that your elite enemies don't feel like pushovers. But let's look and just see how quickly they take down this elite enemy that has an overshield on top of it. Now, he's already taken a few hits, because you see that he has the ice debuff and the necrosis debuff, or nature debuff. I'm not sure what it would be called, but we see here, and in just a few seconds, he's on the ground, damn near dead, and he's dead now from the trigger. Now, he could have gotten an execution there, but, you know, IGN, game journalist, you can't expect them to play video games well. We see them continuing to fight, and as you see, the combat is very dynamic, right? You see that Rook here is switching attacks from one to another to maintain control of the fight and keep all of these different enemies occupied, reacting to their own attacks. Next, we're going to be seeing the crossroads. Now, the crossroads look really, really nice. I really like the way they look, and it's very, very pretty, very expansive. This feels like a realm of spirits, and I like that a lot. It feels right if we're going to be basically just teleporting around. We see here an ogre, which is a special ogre, but he seems to be using the same weapon as all the other ogres. Not sure I like that, but wait, is he using the same weapon? Let me look at that again. Okay, so he's got a big stick here. Let's go back to around here where we saw an ogre right here, and let's see. Yeah, okay, yeah, he is using the same weapon as every other ogre. I don't like that. I think if you're going to give an enemy a name, he should stand out by more than just the name and the place he's in. Otherwise, he's just a generic ogre. It's kind of like the same thing as with all of the named demons in Dragon Age 2, like Zebenkek, the Sky Horror, all of that stuff. Like, the enemy itself was very generic. The fight was a little different, but it was basically you were fighting a regular demon with a lot of health, and then additional enemies were spawning in to make the fight a little bit more complicated. I don't like that. I think if you're going to make an action-packed game, you should look to what Dragon Age 2 tried to do with the very dynamic boss fights, such as the Ancient Rock Wraith, Corypheus, Meredith herself, and the Duke at the end of Assassin. That sort of fight should absolutely be the type of fight that you're going for if you're going to make an action-packed game, and you're going to be leaning away from the tactical combat of an RPG, where you can just rely on the stats of the enemies and the abilities that the enemy uses, almost kind of like an MMO RPG, like World of Warcraft Classic. You can get away with doing things that way if you're doing things very tactically. But if you're going to make it more action, more speed-based, more dodge and parry, and auto-attack based, you need to develop the boss fights more than just, hey, this is a regular ogre and he has a name, and you need to touch this rock here to damage him. Inquisition kind of had this at the start, where you fight that first Pride Demon, where you're like level 2 or 3 at the most, and you're fighting a Pride Demon who's several levels higher than you, and you basically just need to survive him long enough to then use the anchor on the rift to weaken him so you can beat him, right? That felt like an engaging fight, and unfortunately, that was the only one of its kind in the game. Every fight after that was just beat up the enemy until he dies, and I don't know, it was a little cheap. It didn't feel good, especially with Inquisition trying to go more into the action-packed route of things. So, I hope that we get proper bosses and not just regular enemies with different names. Let's go a little further forward. We see here a few different areas, like Arlathan Forest. We're mentioned here in the preview. The IGN lady mentions that the NPCs, the companions, which are now NPCs, you can no longer play as them. The companions have special abilities that need to be used in order to traverse the world, but using the Lyrium Dagger from Solus, you can actually bypass that and get around things yourself. I think that that's a bad thing because then it means that you're not going to be taking all of the different companions, and you might end up just using the same 2 or 3 companions, and you're going to leave the others back at base and never use them. They also mentioned that there's going to be more like horror and bloody and gory scenes in this game, but so far, nothing in this style. They said it about here because there's Darkspawn and there's going to be horror and gore and stuff. Like, there's a dead guy right here, and I would assume he's sleeping if I was to see him. Like, even in Origins, they went out of their way to, have a way for us to see that an enemy, that a person is bloodied or dirty, and so they would just cover them in blood. And for the time, it was okay, but then they kind of just decided to not do that anymore. I don't think they even did that in Dragon Age 2, and I think that was very bad. And now in Veilguard, they have the most well-developed graphics of the previous games, and all of a sudden it's like we're not allowed to see blood, but we're allowed to see fully developed sex scenes where they've said multiple times that, yeah, we're gonna have full nudity in the game and all that stuff. It's like, come on, you can also do a little bit of blood when we're fighting the body horror monstrosities, right? It feels like they're kidifying the violence while going all in on the sexual themes of the game, and it feels like they're kind of missing the point of a fantasy RPG. It's not just about sex, right? There's more to the RPG than just sex. Absolute pass, another Kunari that just looks like a regular person. What are you even doing here? We see here some more Kunari fighting. We see that they have their unique equipment. One thing I dislike about this, I want to look specifically at the spear that this shield one is using. That just looks like a regular spear, and I don't like that because a thing that is established all the way from Origins, and even as far as Inquisition, they mention this. The Kunari use weapons that are comfortable for them to use, and for people in Thetis, the continent of Thetis, because the Kunari are from Pervolan, which is a different continent, but the people of Thetis find these weapons to be rather strange. They don't really fit our hands that much. And so I think that making the weapons of the Kunari look more generic and kind of like just slightly different versions of the weapons that the Thedan people use, I don't know. It's not that great in my opinion. I feel like it would have been better for them to go more exotic. At the same time, I don't really care because big people with big weapons and I like it. So we see here another combo occurring. I still don't like those combos, but whatever. And we see here you can pet the dogs. Now they're petting a Barbari who happens to be an Antiva, which Mabari are all over the place to some extent, but they are a Ferelden breed, so it's kind of weird that they'd be an Antiva. I do believe that petting the dog is the type of thing that you add onto a game when you really, really want to sell the game, but you don't really want to make the game that interesting. So I don't like it being shown in a preview. It immediately makes me like take a step back and remember things like Fallout 4, where you could pet the game, and the first few hours are really nice and really engaging, and then those first 2 hours end, and all of a sudden you realize that the game doesn't have that sauce that makes it feel good, that makes it play nicely, and it just lacked it, and, not great. Not saying that this makes the game bad, just saying that maybe it shouldn't be in a preview. Oh, it's here that they mention that the companions have special abilities, but you don't actually need to have them with you because you can just use the Lyrium Dagger to activate the things that would normally be activated by them. I don't like that. I think if you want to access an area that requires a companion's direct interaction, you should have to have the companion sitting right there next to you, interacting with the thing right next to you, rather than just, I swing my MacGuffin at it and the problem is solved. This is another Kunari that doesn't look like a real Kunari, but we have here Tash. Now, I do like Tash's skin tone. It's very ashen. I like it. There's like a bluish tone to it. I look at her and I go, okay, yeah, that's absolutely a Kunari. That's inhuman. That's fine. I like that. I don't like that she's wearing not really armor, kind of the same thing that I've talked about before. This is very leathery. The armor that she's wearing on that right arm there, it feels more as though it's there for embellishment rather than for protection. So I don't like it that much, but I do like the horn. It's like jade and it's nice. It's really cool. I like it. Um, Overall, smash on Tash. We see another dog there. I hope the IGN reviewer lady petted it. And you can also leave alms for the poor, I think. I think that's what that was. I'm not remembering now. We see here a little bit more of development for the Antivan Crows. They're revealed to actually apparently be the standing army of Antiva, which is kind of weird. Like, a country can't really survive just having a troop of assassins as its only military organization. You kind of need, like, people with armor and swords and shields to, keep the peace. You can't just rely on assassins unless you're a country of criminals. But then again, Antiva is a port city that relies mostly on trade and the like to survive. So they might make it. They might make it through most of the problems that they have to deal with like that. We see here some undead mages, and they do seem interesting. And they do seem interesting in the sense that they are casting their spells, and you can tell that they're using spells. I don't like that they use their own separate spells. I like it when the enemies use roughly the same abilities as the player, because that way it feels as though you're on even terms with the enemies, and so your victories don't feel cheap. I don't think it's ever nice. It doesn't feel nice to me when I want to talk about Morrigan directly in a second, but it doesn't feel nice to me when I just have overpowered abilities that the enemies can't access, and it doesn't feel nice to me when the enemies have overpowered abilities that I can't access. I like it when everybody draws from the same pool, and that way your successes feel much more real. Now, this is something that was the case in Origins and has been the case since, and I disliked it in Dragon Age 2 and in Dragon Age Inquisition. But in Origins, when an enemy started casting a spell, and you recognized that he was casting that spell, you knew exactly what that spell was going to do because it was the same thing as when you cast it, and I think that that's very good. But we see here some Rook ability where he kind of just dashes around and hits everybody with kind of like a Katarina ult from League of Legends, and then everybody gets knocked away. Very nice. It looks cool. Looks nice and fancy. Then he backs away, whips out the bow, and takes this skeleton mage's head off. Very nice. Absolute smash. Morrigan is wife. I think everybody knows this. Morrigan is my favorite romance in all of Dragon Age. I like the way that she starts out being very, very rough exterior, only to realize that she doesn't need to be that way, and she softens, and I like that this even lasted into Inquisition when Alistair approaches her, and Alistair kind of expects to get some mean jabs from her, and kind of like jabs her as well, only to find out that she has in fact softened up, and it's very nice to see. I really like Morrigan. She's one of my favorite characters. Absolute smash to the soul. I want to smash Morrigan's soul, if you know what I mean. But anyway, she, as always, is a little cocky and knows more than the player, as always. Can't really expect any more than that, but as always, she doesn't really require you to, bow down to her expertise for her to share it. She will just tell you what needs to be told to you, and she'll allow you to make the decisions yourself. We see here some more of the lighthouse. The lighthouse is really nice, and apparently it even lets you know, that's what this symbol at the center of the screen means. It lets you know when companions have something to say to you. I think that's very nice. That way you don't have to constantly go and check everything. Okay, so from left to right here, we have Rook, which we can't see, and then we have Dabran, Tash, Alara, Emmerich, Lucanus, Harding, and Neve. And in order, we go smash, 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 smash. I think they all look very nice. Emmerich isn't my type personally, but I think that he looks like a nice older gentleman type of person, and I think he's very much looks interesting as a necromancer. I hope he's more than just quirky professor vibes, and he actually feels like a real necromancer. But I don't know. Looking at him, he might just end up being quirky professor vibes, in which case I will rescind my smash and pass it on to a pass. We see here another instance of petting the dog. Rock, paper, scissors with Manfred, which I'm pretty sure 99% of people will do it once, go, and then never do it again. We see here the workshop, which is kind of the place where you upgrade and enchant your weapons and armor, just putting runes on it and doing all that stuff. Very, very nice. All of the items in Inquisition, not Inquisition, in Veilguard seem unique, which I like. They're leaning into the Mass Effect 3 aspect of it, where you had all of these weapons that were basically just slightly different variations of each other for each weapon type, and so you could have one that was more tailored to your playstyle. I think inevitably this means that some weapons will be just overall bad, but at the same time, I think that this is the best way to go about it, just because that way you don't have the problem of Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition, where you pick up an iron longsword and then you'd kill another enemy with it. You pick up an iron longsword again, and they have different stats. And I think that that's bad. I think it takes away from the game. I really like the way Origins did with the tier system, and the unique items that had always the same stats, rather than like in Dragon Age 2, where the stats of the unique items were decided based on your level when you get it. I don't like that. And because it adds a level of scaling to the game that causes a bloat to just naturally occur. I don't like it when that happens. But in Inquisition, it was also kind of the same. Like the items just scaled to your level when you picked them up, and it created bloat in the stats just by nature of how that sort of system works. So it's better to have the Iron Longsword always has the same stats, and no matter how many of them you pick up or how high level you get, they always stay the same, and that's just better in my opinion. There's Neve being awesome, just staring at the fire and being weird about it. Here we can look at some of Solus' regrets, and we can experience what he experienced in the revolution against Elganan and Gillenane, which, you know, very nice. We get further context to things, and we can find out what happened way back when, before humans were even really the dominant race in Thetis. And we see this creature here, the Kamek Master. This looks very interesting. It's a completely new design. I don't think there's anything even remotely like it in Dragon Age up until now. This looks like a blighted creature, in my opinion. It might, but it's also sapient. It's talking to you and like arguing. So, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing this. I hope that this isn't just a generic creature. I hope that this is just a sign that there's going to be more and more like unique enemies. No, I'm still talking about this. Give me a second. More and more of these generic, not generic, unique enemies that we get to fight and we get to interact with. And I'd be very disappointed if, you know, we fight this guy and then it turns out he's just a generic enemy. I want there to be enemies that are unique and look cool, and we only fight them the one time. Because then it actually is interesting, right? Then it's actually a unique enemy. Otherwise, it's not really unique, right? It's just generic enemy with a name. I am curious to see more about these elven construct thingies. They look neat. They look cool. Those dragons look awesome. Tash looks awesome. Overall, the game looks good, but I will say the game might still suck. I think that the idea that they need to distance themselves from Origins, the game that started the franchise and that allowed the franchise to last. Because let's be honest, Dragon Age 2 didn't do that. Dragon Age 2 damn near killed the franchise. It was not a commercial success by the standards of that Origin set. And then Inquisition came out. Inquisition was Game of the Year. It was good, but I genuinely think that it kind of watered down a lot of the concepts that the game had by kind of taking away the complexity that Origins had. And I think that if we had taken a step back towards that complexity, even if we had gone more the action-packed route, I think it would have been better. We're gonna have to see, right? I think a lot of people expect this game to be bad, and I think a lot of people really, really, really hope this game to be good. I'm one of the people who hopes the game is good, but at the same time, BioWare hasn't exactly done a good job of wowing us with a good game in a while, right? Every game that BioWare has put out since Inquisition has been objectively bad. And I hope that so far we're not just getting wowed by sponsored journalists, which, this preview is basically just an ad, right? It's not a real review because it's sponsored. And sponsored creators who, again, they're obviously going to be positive because otherwise they don't get to be sponsored anymore because that's how that works. So I hope that this is actually good. I hope when this comes out, this is amazing, but it might just suck. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, and cheers!